as we move out of the legislative branch, we're going to move into the executive branch. The important question to ask yourself is, why do we really have a president? Now, one thing we have to remember is that the president doesn't have as much power as a lot of people seem to think that he does. For instance, they are a part of the executive branch, which is actually the largest branch, which is a part of that three-branch system, which is a part of our two-part federal system. So we have to be careful when we're talking about the president and giving him powers that he may or may not have. As promised, we were going to see this graph every single branch. We already talked about the legislative branch, which has the House of Representatives and the Senate. We then have the executive branch, and when we think of the executive branch, we mostly think of the president and vice president. However, there's a whole bureaucracy that we're going to talk about that's under the executive branch. And finally, we have that judicial branch that has the Supreme Court. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I really want you to remember and understand these branches. So we know from the legislative branch that they make laws. Okay, we understood the process of how a bill becomes a law and how hard it is to actually create that law. Well, once they actually do go through that process and make the law, it then goes to the executive branch, and they're in charge of actually executing the laws or carrying them out. They're in charge of really enforcing the fact that they are laws and they are something that everyone should be following. There are many departments that help with this, and they really oversee what is going on in the United States. And then finally, the judicial branch, and they interpret those laws, right? They have that constitutional power of being able to claim whether or not a law is constitutional or not. We, of course, are going to focus on the executive branch. Most people understand and know that there is a president and a vice president within the executive branch. Our current president, Barack Obama, is a Democrat, and he heads the executive branch. We also have a vice president, and his name is Joe Biden. He is also a Democrat, and he's really in charge of being the backup man. He is in charge of the Senate, like we learned in the legislative branch, but he really is only in charge of overseeing what's going on, and he doesn't vote unless there's a tie. And then on the other hand, with the president, he really only does things if the president is unable to do it himself. He is an important person and has lots of influence. However, he does not make any decisions by himself. He is really the backup to make sure if anything happens to the president, we have someone second in command. We also have the federal bureaucracy within that executive branch. It takes a lot of people and a lot of power in order to make sure all of these laws that the legislative branch are enforced and carried out properly. So it's comprised of executive departments, agencies, and the offices are filled with over 3 million full-time civil service employees. This is really important to remember because that is a lot of people, which really does make our executive branch the largest. Similar to Congress, the president has certain qualifications that he or she must meet in order to even be considered to be a president. First of all, they must be at least 35 years old. This helps to make sure that they have experience and that they are well-rounded people. Second, they must be a natural-born citizen. This means they cannot have gained citizenship through the process of naturalization, which we know and understand to be a hard process, but there's still that possibility that someone would try to go through that process just to become president in order to sabotage our country. Though very, very rare or unlikely, this rule is in place. They also must have to have lived in the United States for at least 14 years before being nominated for president. This helps ensure that they know what is going on in the United States before they become president. If they had sat in France for 15 years and then came over, they may or may not know what's going on at all in our country. So this is all to help and make sure that the president is well aware of what's going on and has the U.S.'s best interests at heart. Their current salary is $400,000, which is, yes, much more than me, and yes, I wish I had that salary. However, it's not the largest salary in the world. It is a salary that is comparable to what they do. They are elected for 4-year terms, and they are limited to 2 terms, and we learned this when we learned the amendments for the 22nd Amendment. Most of their power is checked by the legislative branch. They also have checks on the legislative branch, i.e. the veto. We will go further into their powers and what they actually can do next. Even though we really only think of the president and the vice president as being a part of the executive branch, it is actually the largest branch that we have. It's comprised of 15 departments, which each has different offices and councils, as well as independent agencies to make sure that they are carrying out the laws properly. The president selects the people for the White House staff, and he nominates the heads of the department that are then approved by the Senate. This is another example of checks and balances that the legislative branch has over the executive branch. All of this put together is called the bureaucracy. Most people understand and know the process of nominating a president. Many people pay attention to the presidential elections, and they are more likely to vote, as well as pay attention for the media. It is a big media frenzy. We are going to cover this in detail when we go over our political parties unit in a few units. However, I wanted to mention it now so we understand how a president gets to his job. We are very unusual when it comes to this process. In most democracies, nominees for chief executive are chosen by party activists. This is true in France, it's true in Spain, and many other countries. However, for the U.S., the process of nomination is very lengthy and it is very public. Eligible voters can participate in both a caucus and a primary in order to figure out who the official nominee for president will be. A caucus is a meeting of a candidate supporters who choose delegates to a state or national convention. And a primary is a preliminary election that narrows the number of candidates down by determining who will be the nominees in the general election. Both of these are open to the public, but generally can be closed to non-party members. So if you are part of the Republican Party, you can vote in the Republican primary. But if you are a Democrat, you cannot. This is called a closed primary. Most primaries are closed because of the fear that they have of sabotage. Once a nominee is nominated as the official party candidate, they go up against another candidate from the other party. The nominee launches a campaign, which is an organized effort to seek influence on the decision-making process within a specific group. Many campaign techniques are TV ads, internet websites, debates on media, and signs put up all around the United States. Citizens will cast their vote for who they believe is the best candidate, and they do it on the second Tuesday after the first Monday in November. The party that wins the most votes in the states wins all electoral college votes. This is really important to know because we are not actually the people who vote directly for the president. We vote for the party that then votes for the president. So it is a very interesting process. So this means that the Electoral College is the ones that actually elect the president. Our founding fathers were really afraid of mob rule and that the public would take over and would be tyrannical themselves. As we saw in a prior video, they were afraid of too much democracy and not enough democracy all at the same time. So therefore they set up with the 12th Amendment, they set up the Electoral College, which actually are the ones who vote for the president. The Electoral College is supposed to be better because they are supposed to theoretically be the elite and the educated of the country. Therefore, they can make the better decisions for the public. States choose the electors who then cast their votes for a presidential candidate. Each state has as many electoral votes as it does representatives and senators. The winner of the popular vote typically gets all of the Electoral College votes. Some argue that large states are overrepresented because they have more Electoral College votes based on the fact that they have a larger population. Some argue, though, that small states are overrepresented because every state gets 2 Electoral College votes because they have 2 senators. This process is highly debated and is still controversial today. If no candidate gets 270 votes, which is a majority out of 538, the House of Representatives votes for the president, with each state getting 1 vote. This is a very interesting process, and it's a little confusing to figure out.